2. The Wild Ones of Murad Shah. The Lower Pagman Range, July 5th. Tio Pang! Adam faced the huge man dressed in a cloak of fox and lynx skins who held a long, thin knife at his throat, while 2 others held him fast. It didn't look as though he would be able to talk his way out of this ambush. No journey to the north now. He'd probably be dead in a minute. The caravan was resting. Adam had gone down the mountain slope to talk to one of the patrols, and had almost reached their brushwood hideout when, as if from nowhere, 3 men had leapt upon him. Big men in belted furs with strange faces quite like Europeans, grey or green eyes, straight noses, fair and red hair. They had whisked him away from the patrol's hideout so fast that the 3 guerrillas sitting inside had not heard a thing. It was mid-morning and the sun was hot. These men were dressed for a colder climate than this. One of them unwound a length of rope from around his waist, rough rope that might have been made from creepers, and tied the eagle's ankles and wrists with it. Another man took up a long pole, and the 3 pushed it between his arms and legs and lifted him, as people do a dead or captured wild animal, and carried him uphill, away from where the guerrilla caravan was resting. He could now see that the men were wearing strings of pierced crystals around their necks. Their hair was long and matted, and their feet padded along with the tread of mountain folk. Each one wore a beautiful silver-mounted dagger in his belt. As they walked, they chanted softly, "Pang, pang." Adam struggled and started to shout, hoping to attract the attention of some of his guards. Instantly, the men stopped. One of them picked up a rock and almost casually, but with great precision, struck the captive at the back of the neck. The eagle blacked out. He came to with a searing headache and found himself still being carried, still uphill. He gave a cry as the jogging pace of the men jolted his spine, the pain shooting up into his head. Quietly the leader took up a stone and indicated, by signs, that if he did not remain silent, he would be struck again. "Amu leysat," he said. Pang? Amu leysat? He wasn't Russian anyway. He lost consciousness again. When he came to, someone was splashing cold water on his face. He was in a cave, with a brushwood awning just covering the entrance. Inside, a fire was burning, fed by some dry material which gave almost no smoke. Around him, lit by torches of resinous wood stuck at an angle from holes in the cavern walls, he could see shapes hanging. Human? No. They were pieces of animals, smoked and drying. The man handed him something and made motions to show that he should eat it. His hands were still bound. Adam took the food with both hands and tasted it. It was a sort of bread made of barley or lentils. It tasted gritty and had pieces of charcoal embedded in it. Then the man lifted a clay pot and held it to his lips. Adam drank. It was good water. The 15 or 20 other men in the cave crowded around him, making welcoming signs. Adam indicated that they should untie him, but the leader laughed and shook his head. There was nothing to do but wait. They had emptied Adam's pockets and were amusing themselves, examining their contents. Passed from hand to hand, they looked at, shook, and even tasted the various objects. They liked the watch, the pocket compass, and the knife. They seemed baffled by the comb, the money, and the notebook. Finally, they put everything in a neat heap and covered the pile with stones. Some hours later, they brought him soup of meat flavoured with herbs. It was delicious. "You're Pang," they said. Evidently he was Pang. Your undoubtedly meant eat. His head still hurt. It must be late afternoon. They had not killed him, but what did they want? And what would happen to the caravan? He was sitting, still bound, on the cave floor with his back to a rock. One of the wild men had, with a kindly gesture, put a fur blanket under him and made a cushion from a bundle of straw for him to lean against. He watched as the men went about their business. 2 or 3 of them were cleaning weapons. There was a pile of knives, 1 or 2 modern guns, and an automatic pistol. They showed that they knew what they were doing, using the oil and the pull-throughs expertly, squinting down barrels for traces of dirt, emptying and refilling magazines to check for possible jamming. Armed, experienced fighters. 2 men were operating a strange type of mill, a conical container into which they put large seeds. When they had satisfied themselves that it was full enough, they fixed a heavy, angled wooden stick into the centre of the mill. One man was then blindfolded, for all the world like an ox on a water wheel, and taking the stick in his hands, he moved round and round. The other man inspected the result of his labours, a thick oil dripping into a bowl from small holes in the base of the earthenware cone. When the bowl was nearly full, one of the men took up a pot and filled it with the liquid. Across the cave from this scene, 3 others were carefully laying long strips of dried meat on boards covered with cloth. Wooden mallets were used to pound the meat until it became a powder. This material was then put, in handfuls, into cotton bags, which were weighed in the hand and then sewn up. Concentrated food rations, no doubt. This was all very interesting, thought Adam, but what about his own people? They would be worried and might send out a party to search for him. And yet, if they did, it was unlikely that they would find this place. The men were now talking together in low voices. They were discussing something and pointing to the cave's opening. They did not seem interested in Adam at all. Every now and then they would stand still and listen. Adam could not hear anything, but they probably had far better ears than his. They must have had a scout outside. A man came into the darkness, running, and repeated something 3 or 4 times. It sounded to Adam like Marut, which was not reassuring. He remembered that this was the name of a fallen angel from Islamic lore. Marut taught men magic, and he was suspended in a rocky pit on earth as a punishment for his sins. Marut. Suddenly the dwindling light from the cave's entrance was briefly darkened, and a tall, thin figure, dressed in some tight-fitting garment, lifted the awning and slipped inside. The cavemen surrounded him. With cries of welcome, they offered him something to drink, and then pointed out the captive. The newcomer unslung an automatic carbine from his back and walked over to Adam, sitting down on the ground in front of him. Adam saw that he had a full beard like his captor's, but was darker, more like an Afghan, and was dressed in a grey Afghan army uniform without rank or other badges. Perhaps 30 years of age, he had very dark eyes and extremely white teeth, which flashed as he smiled. Before he said anything, he reached forward with a knife in his hand and cut the bonds from Adam's limbs with 2 quick movements. Then he sat back, cross-legged, and took off his Pashtun sandals, massaging his feet. Apparently satisfied with this, he said in Dari, "Welcome. We should be eating in about an hour when the lads have got the food ready." Adam felt distinctly annoyed. "What is this all about? I've been attacked and kidnapped, and I don't want to eat with you, whoever you are." Once he'd said it, he felt slightly ridiculous. The man laughed. "I'm sorry, but now you know where we are, we'll have to keep you here until we move on. This is our Karaga, our resting place." "Who am I going to tell, you idiot? Who cares what a bunch of madmen are doing and where they are? You better let me go. I suppose you've told these apes that you are the accursed demon Marut and got them to work for you." "Marut?" The other man seemed surprised. "Oh, you mean my name. I am called Murad Shah. These are my Nuristani lads from the northeastern mountains, you know. That's the way they pronounce Murad. I don't suppose they have ever heard of Marut." "Marut, me." He started to laugh. "I've been called some things, but never Marut. Who are you?" "I am called Tio Pang by your men," said Adam, "but I am the eagle." "Kara Kush? The eagle?" Murad was on his feet. "I had no idea. I'm very sorry." He held out his hand, and Adam took it. "Tio Pang," said Murad, "only means you're a foreigner in Nuristani. You are foreign, we all are, to these men." "What are you doing here?" Adam wanted to know. "We're fighting the Russians, like you." "Where is this place?" 3 kilometers northwest of Bagabad, land of gardens in the foothills. Adam wanted to know where Murad was from. "And where did you collect these goons? They're a long way from home." "We are all from Syed Kel," Murad sighed. "We are the only survivors of the battle last January. If it hadn't been for these men, my bodyguard, I'd be dead." 6 months before, the Eagle knew, the Russians had attacked one of the strongholds of the resistance at Syed Kel, the place named after the Syed family. The defenders had fought for 11 days with light arms against the most powerful weapons of the invading army. Even the outside world's newspapers had heard of the battle. It had been a disaster for the Mujahideen. Syed Kel no longer existed. "There were nearly 4,000 of us, not counting women and children," said Murad. "And they had tanks and aircraft. Our rifles had no more effect on them than pea shooters, and we were short of ammunition. We fortified every house and dug tank traps in the road. At night we burned the fields and the orchards where they were bivouacked with kerosene, roasting many but destroying our own land. We made bows and arrows when the ammunition ran out. We made holes in the ground and lay in them until they overran us. Then we rose out of those holes with sharpened sticks and stabbed them. But still they kept coming." "What were your casualties?" Adam asked. "Over 1,000 killed, though we estimate that we killed or wounded twice as many of the enemy. 2,600 of our men were captured." "What happened to them?" Adam could guess, but he wanted to know just the same. Murad shrugged. 400 or so were lined up and shot. About 2,000, many of them wounded, were taken away in trucks. Kabul radio said these had been put into camps for re-education. They will, I think, try to force them into the army, because men are so short and the Russians are always pressing the Afghan army to do more fighting. Of course, they'll only desert to the Mujahideen." "How did you get away?" "I had been hit 2 or 3 times and fainted. I suppose through loss of blood and so on, shock, pain, I don't know. These fellows you see here, the goons, are what's left of my halka, my bodyguard. They had originally fled to Syed Kel over the high eastern mountains when their villages were destroyed by air attacks. They carried me here and looked after me. They are great experts in survival, and they know how to look after wounds." A mountaineer brought 2 mugs of tea and kishmish, dried fruit. "And you have set up a miniature village in this cave?" "That's right. As you see, they know all kinds of arts and crafts, herbs, cookery, hunting, making things. Their fur coats would fetch a fortune in Western Europe, I expect. Not to mention those handmade harps slung on their backs." "I think," said Adam, grinning at the simple faces of the cavemen, "the time has come that you came to us and taught us a few things." "I was hoping you would say that, Commander," said Murad. Captain Azambai, in charge of the caravan, and had set the rest to carrying out exercises, weapon cleaning, and the other boring tasks which had to be done. Adam had been missing for 5 hours. Azambai knew there was no real prospect of finding him if he had got lost or been captured by bandits, for the hills were riddled with caves and in places covered with thick brush. Small valleys filled with cedars, mulberries, mountain garlic, and a dozen different kinds of flowering shrubs gave perfect cover, both to men and to the wildlife. It was said that the mountain tigers had their haunts there too, though they only attacked people in the winter when hunger forced them to prowl around the villages. In spite of Nur asking him to send out more patrols, Azambai decided that they must wait. Just as she was about to go off on her own to look for him, Adam appeared, surrounded by a ferocious flock of Nuristanis, carrying gifts of oil, honey, and snow leopard skins. Murad was introduced to the captain. "This isn't good enough, you know," Azambai said, after welcoming him briefly. "Your men ought to be better disciplined than they evidently are." Murad gave him a mock salute. "I'll try to fix them up with uniforms, General." "Captain, no, there aren't any uniforms. We'll get local clothes from the villagers, and I'll try to find 1 or 2 of our own people who speak your men's language. We'll never be able to talk to them if you get shot, and they might do anything. This really is not very satisfactory." Azambai the soldier couldn't say how delighted he was that Adam was safe, after all, but his emotions had to come out somehow. Murad saw the point. "Sorry, Captain. Yes, I'll cooperate in any way you wish. We'll even go back to the Eagle's Nest if you think that we'd be more useful there." Azambai softened. "That would be the best thing, of course, but I quite like the look of these people. We'll just have to try to turn them into askars, soldiers, as I'm trying to do with the other mujahideen. It will be difficult for them, but discipline will see us through, you know that." "I know that." The following day, as the caravan continued towards the high Hindu Kush, the climb became more and more precipitous. At the first halt there was a small inn where the plodding Nuristanis, who had been taking turns at riding and walking, were able to hire small, powerful Katagan ponies with the money which Murad, usefully and surprising everyone, produced from a leather bag. Gold sovereigns with the head of King George V on them. Murad explained that they had come from a hoard buried since the 1919 war with Britain, and donated by the man who had captured them from an Indian army war chest 60 years before. He had been an ancient, wizened fruit farmer who only had enough cherry trees to keep body and soul together, but he never thought of using the gold for himself. "I thought it'll come in handy," he said. Murad had come across him quite casually and had said that he was a mujahid, nothing else, and was presented with the sovereigns. Louis Palmer unexpectedly was found to have a working knowledge of the Nuristani language. It had interested him for years, and he had had several men from the secret land working for him from time to time. He soon became the chief of one dasta and Murad's second in command. He sang their songs to their own harp music, and even seemed to enjoy the dried meat which they cooked, mixed with herbs and water, and served with melted butter and sprigs of fresh rosemary at each midday halt. He even taught them long strings of words in Dari Persian and Pashto, something that they had not wanted to attempt before.